The air was thick with moisture, carrying the scent of damp pavement and distant pine. Streetlights buzzed overhead, flickering in the misty haze of a late September evening. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the pavement still gleamed, reflecting the neon open signs of closed convenience stores and the tired headlights of passing cars. Rachel pulled her jacket tighter around herself, shifting the cardboard box in her arms. The weight of it made her shoulder ache, but she was too tired to care. Apartment 406. A fresh start. A new city. A new life. She had wanted this. No more roommates. No more splitting rent or sharing fridge space with passive-aggressive post-it notes. This one-bedroom apartment in an aging 4-story complex wasn't much, but it was hers. Finally, hers. The complex itself was old, too old. The brick facade was cracked in places, vines creeping up the sides, reaching toward darkened windows. It wasn't a bad neighborhood, but there was something about the building that made it feel forgotten, like time had passed it by, leaving only ghosts of past tenants behind. She stepped into the building's lobby, the doors swinging shut behind her with a dull thud. The air inside smelled different: stale carpet, aging wood, and a faint trace of industrial cleaner. The overhead light buzzed, flickering every few seconds. There was a single security camera, hanging awkwardly from the ceiling in the corner. Its red light blinked lazily, but Rachel wasn't sure if it was even recording. She pressed the button for the elevator. It groaned, its cables whining as it descended, before creaking open with a reluctant hiss. The walls inside were lined with smudged mirrors, giving the cramped space an eerie, endless effect. The air inside was heavier, carrying the faint scent of cigarette smoke and something else. Something damp. Mildew? Sweat? Rachel hesitated for just a second before stepping in. The doors slid shut, and for the first time, she felt it. That creeping sensation, like she was being watched. Apartment 406 was exactly as she left it, empty except for a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, and stacks of unopened boxes. The walls were bare, the kitchen smelled faintly of old paint, and the only sound was the distant hum of the refrigerator. She set the last box on the counter and exhaled. Finally, home. She kicked off her damp sneakers, stretching her sore legs. The place was silent, save for the occasional creak from the wooden floors. Old buildings make noise, but still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about it felt off. The air inside was warmer than she expected, the kind of warmth that felt lived in, like someone had just been here before she arrived. She shook off the thought and turned on her Bluetooth speaker, letting soft indie music fill the space. Noise was good. Noise kept the thoughts away. Flopping onto the mattress, Rachel checked her phone. 12:03 a.m. She groaned. Tomorrow was a big day. A new job, new coworkers, a chance to start over. She turned off the light, crawled under the covers, and let the darkness take her. Rachel woke up to the sound of something shifting. Not a loud noise. Not something obvious like a bang or a crash, but a small, deliberate shift. Her eyes fluttered open, her body still heavy with sleep. The building settling, probably. Then, another noise. A faint, deliberate sound, like something dragging. Her heart skipped. She listened, really listened. The refrigerator hummed. The rain tapped against the window. And beneath that, a whisper of movement. Rachel held her breath. It was coming from the floor. Her stomach twisted. From beneath the bed. A part of her wanted to laugh it off. How cliché, how absurd. But another part of her, the primal part that had been conditioned by generations of survival instinct, screamed at her that something was wrong. She stayed completely still. Breathe. Don't be stupid. It was probably nothing. Maybe the building's pipes. Maybe she had a loose floorboard. She turned onto her side, forcing her eyes shut. Ignore it. The room was dark, save for the glow of the street lamp filtering through the blinds. Her phone rested on the nightstand, its screen black. She could grab it, check the time. She didn't move, because suddenly, she wasn't sure if she was alone. Then, a whisper, so faint, she almost convinced herself she imagined it. But she didn't, because the whisper wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from underneath the bed. Rachel's body locked up. No, 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 no. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had to look. Her fingers curled around the edge of the mattress. Her body screamed at her to stay still, to not check. But she couldn't. Slowly, 1 inch at a time, she lowered her phone over the edge of the bed. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dusty wooden floor beneath her. Nothing. Just shadows. Just. Rachel's breath caught. A pair of eyes stared back at her. Wide. Unblinking. Human. Her scream caught in her throat. A hand, pale, bony, covered in grime, darted out and grabbed her wrist. Rachel jerked back, scrambling onto the mattress, heart slamming against her ribs. The thing under the bed moved. Rachel flung herself off the mattress, slamming into the nightstand. Her phone clattered to the floor, the flashlight spinning wildly, casting erratic shadows across the walls. The bed creaked. The sound of something sliding. Rachel didn't wait. She ran. Seattle, Washington, 1 a.m. Rachel's pulse pounded in her ears as she stumbled backward, her bare feet slapping against the cold wooden floor. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps as she stared at the bed. Something had been under there. Someone. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, its flashlight still spinning wildly across the walls, throwing eerie shadows. The corner of her mattress had lifted slightly, as if whatever had been underneath had moved, or was still moving. She had to get out. Now. Rachel lunged for the door, twisting the handle violently. Locked. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't locked it. Had she? A noise. A slow, deliberate shift beneath the bed. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, as if something unseen was pressing down on her chest. She needed to move. Her fingers fumbled against the lock, heart hammering against her ribs. The door wouldn't budge. Then, another sound, this time from the closet. A slow, measured creak, like a door being opened an inch at a time. Rachel's breath hitched as her gaze flicked toward it. The closet door stood ajar, though she swore it had been shut before she went to bed. Was there someone in there too? She forced herself to breathe, pushing away the panic clawing at her throat. Think. Her only option was the window. It was old and stiff, but it was big enough. She turned toward it, but the moment she took a step, a voice. Soft, almost playful. Rachel. It came from under the bed. Rachel's entire body seized. She had lived alone for less than 24 hours. She hadn't told anyone in Seattle her new address yet. No one should know she was here. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move. Then, a scraping sound, like nails dragging against wood. Rachel's breath hitched. The bed shifted an inch, like someone was pressing against it from underneath. She couldn't stay here. With a burst of adrenaline, she sprinted toward the window, fingers wrapping around the latch. Stuck. No, she whispered frantically, jiggling the lock, prying it open with all her strength. Behind her, the mattress lifted slightly. Then, a hand, pale, bony, sliding out from under the bed. Rachel screamed. The window finally gave, the latch clicking open. Rachel threw it up and didn't think. She just climbed. Her feet hit the fire escape with a metallic clang, her breath sharp and uneven. She didn't dare look back. If she looked, she would see it. She clambered down, the iron bars freezing against her palms. The metal ladder groaned beneath her weight, the night air sharp against her damp skin. Below, the alley stretched out, empty except for the distant hum of the city beyond. If she could just reach the street. A thud. From her window, Rachel's head snapped up, her heart nearly stopping. A face was there, peering down at her from inside her apartment. Not just any face. Her own. An exact reflection of herself. Only, it was smiling. Rachel nearly lost her grip. What the hell was that? The figure inside the apartment tilted its head, its expression widening into an unnatural grin, stretching too far. Then, the window slammed shut. Rachel didn't think. She just ran. She didn't stop until she reached a 24-hour diner a few blocks away, the neon open sign buzzing softly above the entrance. She pushed through the door, hands shaking, the bell jingling in the silence. A few late-night customers sat at the counter, truckers, Night shift workers, a tired-looking waitress who barely glanced up as Rachel slid into a booth. She felt exposed, vulnerable, but at least she wasn't alone. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. Seattle Emergency Services, what's your emergency? Rachel swallowed. Someone was in my apartment, under my bed. She stopped. How could she explain the thing in the window? The reflection? Would they even believe her? The operator's voice was calm. Are you in immediate danger? Rachel exhaled. Was she? She glanced at the diner door. No one had followed her. No brown pickup truck outside. No shadowy figures lurking in the lot. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the smell of burnt coffee. No, she said slowly. Not anymore. The operator sighed. Would you like an officer to come check your apartment? Rachel hesitated. Did she? After a moment, she said, I need a minute. Take your time, ma'am. Call us back if you need assistance. The line went dead. Rachel set the phone down, her fingers still trembling. The diner was warm, familiar. The sounds of clinking plates and quiet conversation felt safe. But she knew she couldn't stay here forever. She had to go back. She had to see if it was real. Rachel stood outside apartment 406 an hour later, her keys clutched so tightly they dug into her palm. The hallway was eerily quiet. No noises, no movement, just the old, musty scent of the carpeted floor and the faint hum of distant city traffic. She swallowed the lump in her throat and slid the key into the lock, pushing the door open slowly. The apartment was normal. Nothing out of place. The bed was still there. The window was closed. No signs of forced entry. Had she imagined it? Had exhaustion warped her mind into seeing things that weren't there? She took a slow step inside, heart hammering. Nothing moved. She exhaled a shaky breath and let the door shut behind her. Maybe she just needed sleep. Maybe everything would be fine in the morning. Rachel climbed into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin, willing herself to relax. Silence. Then, a slow, deliberate whisper. From under the bed. Welcome back. Rachel's scream never left her throat. Seattle, Washington, the next day. Rachel barely slept. When she did, it was shallow, restless. A state of half-conscious terror where every shift in the air, every creak of the floorboards sent her bolting upright. She spent the rest of the night in the diner, nursing cup after cup of bitter coffee, eyes darting toward the door every time someone walked in. By the time morning came, exhaustion had sunk its claws into her. But she knew she had to go back. She needed to know. Rachel had always been rational, logical. She had spent years telling herself ghosts weren't real, that demons were just myths, that horror movies were fiction, nothing more. But last night had shaken something deep inside her. Was there really someone under her bed? Did she just imagine it? The only way to know for sure was to catch it on camera. She bought a small security camera on her way back to the apartment, one of those motion-activated ones people used for baby monitors or front doors. It wasn't expensive, but it would do the job. When she stepped back into apartment 406, a chill rolled down her spine. The place was exactly as she left it. The air inside felt untouched, stale, as if nothing had moved in the hours she was gone. The only sign of last night's terror was the upturned nightstand and the marks on her wrist where the hand had grabbed her. She swallowed and got to work. The camera was small enough to fit under the bed, its lens pointed outward. If something was under there, it would have nowhere to hide. Rachel pressed record, set her phone to live stream the footage, and placed the device on her nightstand. If anything moved under there tonight, she'd see it. That night, she lay awake, staring at the screen. The grainy night vision feed displayed an empty, dust-covered floor beneath her bed. Minutes passed, then an hour, then two. Nothing. Her eyelids grew heavy, the exhaustion finally overpowering her fear. The rhythmic hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustling of the city outside, it all blurred together in a lullaby of normalcy. Maybe she had imagined it. She let her eyes slip shut, and then, a soft click. Her eyes snapped open. The screen showed movement. Rachel's blood ran cold. Something shifted under the bed. It wasn't fast. It wasn't a glitch. It was slow, deliberate, a shadow that shouldn't have been there. Her body froze. She reached for her phone with trembling fingers and turned up the volume. A whisper, faint, muffled. "Rachel." Her pulse roared in her ears. The figure under the bed shifted again, its limbs stretching, unfolding like a puppet untangling itself from invisible strings. Then, a face, just barely visible in the night vision. Its features were wrong, distorted, stretched too far, its eyes wide, unblinking, locked onto the camera. It was grinning. Rachel threw the phone away and bolted upright. The whispering didn't stop. "Come down here." She lunged for the light switch. A sharp thud sounded beneath the bed. By the time the room flooded with light, it was gone. Rachel's breath came in sharp gasps, her body pressed against the far wall, as far from the bed as possible. The camera was still recording, the screen flickering slightly from where it had landed on the floor. The timestamp on the footage read 3:14 a.m. Her fingers curled around the nightstand for balance. She had to look. With slow, trembling steps, she crouched down, gripping the edge of the mattress. One move at a time, she lifted the blanket. The space beneath the bed was empty. No dust disturbed, no handprints, no footprints, nothing. Rachel's chest heaved. Her mind raced for an explanation. Then her eyes landed on something else. A square cut into the wooden floor. It was subtle, nearly invisible, but now that she was looking directly at it, she could see the faint outline of a hidden hatch. A cold wave of horror washed over her. Had it always been there? She pressed her palm against it. The wood shifted beneath her touch. A secret door. Rachel yanked her hand back. No, no way. She stumbled away from the bed, her mind screaming at her to leave. But she couldn't, because now, she knew, whatever was under the bed hadn't just disappeared. It had crawled deeper, into the walls, into the floors, and it was still here. Rachel's heart pounded as she stared at the square outline beneath her bed. A trapdoor, a secret hatch hidden beneath the floorboards. It had been there all along, right under where she slept. Her fingers trembled as she traced the edges of the cut wood. It wasn't crude. It was precise, deliberately shaped, designed to blend in. Her stomach churned. This wasn't an accident. Someone had built this, and someone had been using it. Rachel forced herself to breathe. She reached for her phone, switching on the flashlight before slowly pressing her palm against the wooden panel. It shifted immediately. Not locked, not sealed. Whoever had been beneath her bed hadn't been trapped. They had been able to come and go as they pleased. A cold, paralyzing horror crawled through her veins, but she couldn't stop now. She pushed harder, lifting the hatch open with a slow, creaking groan. Beneath it was a gaping hole in the floor. A narrow, man-made tunnel stretched downward into complete darkness. The air that rose from it was stale, damp, and wrong. Rachel swallowed hard. She knew she should call the police. She knew, but something deep inside her whispered, "If you close it now, you'll never know what was watching you." Hands shaking, she swung her legs over the edge and began to climb down. The ladder was metal, cold and rusted. It groaned under her weight, each rung vibrating slightly as she descended. The deeper she went, the stronger the smell became. Earth, mold, and something faintly metallic. The tunnel walls were rough stone, carved out unevenly, as if someone had dug it by hand. The further she climbed, the quieter everything became. No city noise, no hum of the refrigerator above, just silence. Then, her foot hit solid ground. Rachel hesitated, flashlight beams sweeping across the space. A tunnel stretched out before her, disappearing into the dark. The walls weren't stone anymore. They were lined with wooden planks. Old, rotting, like the inside of a forgotten basement. Rachel's breath came in shallow gasps. And then, something shifted in the darkness ahead. She moved cautiously, every step sending tiny echoes down the tunnel. Then, her light caught something ahead. A door. Not an ancient, crumbling door. A modern one. It was steel, with bolted locks on the outside. Rachel's stomach lurched. Why was it locked from this side? She pressed her ear against the metal, listening. Silence. She gripped the handle and pushed. The door swung open, and Rachel stepped into a room that should not exist. The space was small, no bigger than a storage unit. A single flickering light bulb hung from the ceiling. Rachel's flashlight flickered across the walls, and her stomach turned. The room was lived in. There was a cot, its mattress stained and thin. A wooden desk, covered in scraps of paper. A mirror, cracked down the center, reflecting the room back at her in distorted fragments. And worst of all, a journal, tattered, its pages yellowed and frayed. It sat open on the desk, the handwriting cramped and uneven. Rachel's hands trembled as she picked it up. She began to read. September 3rd. She moved in today. I watched her bring her things inside. She listens to music when she unpacks. Soft songs. Pretty voice. I like when she sings along. Rachel's blood ran cold. She flipped further. September 7th. She sleeps on her side. I can hear her breathing through the floor. It's nice. Steady. I think she would scream if she saw me. I hope she doesn't look. Her breath came in short, gasping bursts. September 10th. She almost saw me tonight. Her phone light shined too far under the bed. I was so still. I don't think she knew. I hope she doesn't know. Rachel dropped the journal. Her body shook violently. This wasn't just some random stalker. Whoever had been living here had been watching her for weeks. From the moment she moved in, something moved behind her. Rachel whirled around, her flashlight beam flickering against the mirror. For a split second, she saw it. A shadow in the reflection. Behind her. Rachel spun. Nothing. Her breath hitched. But she wasn't alone. Then, a whisper, right beside her ear. I told you not to look. Rachel screamed. She bolted for the ladder, her feet slipping against the rusted metal as she scrambled upward. Something grabbed her ankle. Cold. Too strong. Rachel kicked, thrashing wildly. Her foot connected. A sickening crunch. The grip loosened. She climbed faster than she ever had in her life. Bursting into her apartment, she grabbed her keys, her phone, and she ran. Rachel never went back to apartment 406. She didn't file a police report. She didn't tell the landlord. She simply left. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered, had she imagined it? Had the exhaustion warped her mind? Had fear twisted reality into something else? Then, 1 week later, she received a package. No return address. Just a small, unmarked box. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was her old Bluetooth speaker. And a note, scrawled in uneven handwriting. I miss when you sang. Rachel's breath hitched. Somewhere, he was still watching. Rachel never went back to apartment 406. She packed what little she had left in her car that night and drove, not stopping until she reached a motel outside Portland. For weeks, she stayed there, too afraid to sleep near a bed, too afraid to close her eyes. She kept the lights on, the doors locked, her back pressed against the headboard as she tried to forget the voice that had whispered her name from the darkness beneath her. But even now, in a different city, in a different state, she could still feel him watching. One afternoon, while scrolling through apartment listings, Rachel received an email. Subject, urgent, apartment 406 lease termination. Her breath hitched as she hesitated before opening it. Ms. Carter, we regret to inform you that your lease at 406 has not been formally terminated. As per our policy, tenants must return to the unit to complete the necessary paperwork. Failure to do so may result in additional fees. Please arrange a time with management to resolve this matter. Rachel's heart pounded. Go back? She hadn't told anyone what happened that night. She hadn't filed a police report. She had just left. And now, the apartment was calling her back. For the briefest moment, she considered ignoring it. But something in the pit of her stomach told her that this wasn't over. If she didn't face it now, she never would. It was a gray, overcast evening when Rachel pulled into the parking lot of her old building. Her hands trembled as she gripped the wheel. The place looked the same, too normal for the horrors hidden beneath it. She took a deep breath and stepped out. The building manager, Mr. Holloway, met her at the entrance. He was an older man, round in the middle, his face lined with years of dealing with tenants who were less than reliable. Miss Carter, he greeted her. Glad you came back. Shouldn't take more than a few minutes. Rachel forced a nod, following him up the stairs, her stomach tightening with every step. The hallway stretched before her, exactly as she remembered. And then she saw the door. Her breath caught. Mr. Holloway unlocked it and pushed it open. "Go ahead. I'll wait out here," he said too quickly. Rachel hesitated. He wouldn't step inside. Her gut twisted, but she forced herself forward. She crossed the threshold and froze. The apartment was empty, but something was waiting for her. A note. It was placed neatly on the floor, directly where her bed had once been. Rachel's throat went dry as she picked it up, her fingers shaking as she unfolded the paper. The handwriting was familiar. "I knew you'd come back." Rachel's vision blurred. The walls felt smaller. She turned toward the closet, the one she had been too afraid to check that night. It was slightly ajar, and something shifted inside. Rachel's breath caught, and then the door swung open. A figure stepped forward. Tall, thin, wrong. The grin stretched too far. Rachel tried to scream, but the door slammed shut behind her.